The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey, the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency, but they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families, and they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization, doing great stuff all around the state. Hey everybody, I'm Craig Foley. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. So glad to have you with us again this week. And my usual people are here. Nancy Derringer, gleefully occupying
the bimbo chair.
The bimbo chair.
Yeah, that's right. It's also the X starts with X, ends with Y complaint chair.
Oh, that's right. So we're going to be naming a lot of things here this weekend. I'll explain in just a minute. We also have, of course, Alan Langle, who is the editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit with us. Thank you. Welcome back. It has been.
Yeah.
And Steve Fishman, noted attorney, is back with us again today. We certainly do appreciate that. So you mentioned that. Okay, so now, wait, could we call it the Xfinity Schmuck of the Week Award?
Well,
we've already named it.
I feel like
we've already named it officially. This is a new feature we're adding here, the Schmuck of the Week. So we've been thinking about who's going to get nominated for this, and I've already got my candidate. We'll do this at the end of the show today because it'll be a fun way to do it. But we all decided before we started that it couldn't be Donald Trump's. We just named the trophy after him.
Yeah.
So it's the Donald J. Trump
Schmuck
of the Week Award.
Exactly.
It's like the Lombardi Trophy, right? Some things because otherwise every week we could be here. But let's start. Let's start with our commander-in-chief because we got a very reassuring briefing from the president the other day on the coronavirus outbreak that is taking place. It is wreaking havoc on the stock market. As a matter of fact, the Dow Jones, as we speak, and I can do this live, is down 630 points today.
That's
on top of
that's 400 better than where it was at about 10 o'clock.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a slight rebound taking place. The president, in the Q&A section of that briefing the other day, tried to suggest that the stock market drop might be due to the Democratic debate that had taken place the night before. Despite what we all know is the global fears about the supply chain and travel and everything else that goes along with this outbreak.
Not only that, he said the Tuesday night's debate impacted the crash of the stock market, when in fact the crash happened during the day on Monday and during the day on Tuesday before the debate.
Yeah. Like I said, anybody with a quarter of a brain knows that, if China's in the midst of this and they're closing schools for a month and entire towns are quarantined, I'm sorry, that is going to disrupt the flow of goods and services around the globe.
When you say anyone with a quarter of a brain, and then we see a story about Garth Brooks.
Well, with that, stop! Don't give away my schmuck of the week. We're going to get to that. But yes, no. Well, that's a little tease there, everybody.
So there's a couple things. The first thing I think we have to remember is that when someone like Donald Trump is talking about what he thinks, somebody asked him about the coronavirus, my guess is he probably thought they were referring to a Mexican beer before they even thought about any kind of sickness. But secondly, could anybody have done it worse than the Chinese handled this?
No.
It shows, and I've had a lot of conversations about this. Totalitarian society is great. If you want to make people goose step in line and you want to make sure nobody ever says anything and clean up everything on the floor, but it ain't great when it comes to dealing with something like this, because their reaction and what they did to the people, who were trying to do something about it. And they were sending them off to their version of the gulag for even daring to mention that, maybe there's a little problem here. And then they turn around in totalitarianism again, and they close down everything, which is the worst thing you can do for their own economy and the world's economy. It's astounding how you can be so completely and totally wrong.
And we are starting to see some of that. I mean, you saw the other day when Trump is giving his press conference, he's got all the CDC people, all the doctors behind him, and it's clear he's told them, shut up. We're going to put Mike Pence ahead of this. You guys aren't. And they've already had disputes. There were disputes over whether to bring the people back from the ships back into the country.
Right.
The CDC said no. Trump said yes. I mean,
No, I
it's
thought
all
Trump said no. Somebody else said yes and let him in because he's supposedly furious about this.
Oh, really? Okay.
right.
Then I apologize. I
'Cause,
apologize
he's
to
the
Mr.
germaphobe.
Trump.
He's the one who wanted all flights from Africa stopped during the
Yeah.
Ebola scare, which killed approximately one American, I
So-
believe it
yeah,
was. Yeah,
something like
so,
that.
Right, okay.
Right, and
But-
it's hard to get.
But you mentioned, of course, this totalitarian society, and one of the people that allegedly was supposed to be somewhat silenced about this outbreak is Dr. Nancy Messonnier, who's the head of the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, the exact type of person that you would want to be heading up this sort of effort. She happens to be the sister of Rod Rosenstein, who, of course, oversaw the Mueller investigation. So there are people out there that are actually alleging that this is a giant conspiracy to take down the president by making him look bad in his response to this and tanking the market before the election.
And one of them is Rush Limbaugh. And
Yes, well-
I have now moved from cancer is a terrible thing that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy to
Well, I think schmuck of
It's like die
He doesn't
faster.
get schmuck of the week. He gets schmuck of the century.
yeah, well, the
But
last
I mean,
century.
the fact that people are actually thinking about this through that lens,
Yeah.
like somehow this outbreak
This-
of this virus is somehow designed to take down the president, is a level of paranoia
It's not
and freakishness that I cannot
Paranoia.
tolerate.
It's propaganda.
Well, that's
okay?
true.
I interviewed those two nice young people from Means TV, which you probably know about this last summer.
Yes.
Not this past one, the summer before last, when they started after they did their AOC video.
Yes.
And they are very committed leftists, and they talk about and they refer to their work as propaganda, which sounds, like something out of Fidel Castro, Castro's Cuba. But what's going on the right wing if it isn't propaganda? This is Fox News. This is, Rush Limbaugh speaks to the dumber ones. Fox News speaks to the ones who can't apparently move off of their couch, between 8 and whenever bedtime is for, Ma and Pa Kettle. But I mean, it's just like it is a multi-pronged propaganda network that these folks are running. So.
Well, and is anybody feeling good that Mike Pence was chosen to sort of lead up this effort?
I was about to comment on
Great.
that. I'm sure the people in Indiana, how great he did with the HIV problems there.
Yeah.
He's the perfect candidate to preside over this. I guarantee you the language that, I don't know if you guys have been reading stuff. I've been trying to read, in the Times and Washington Post. And quite frankly, it's complicated stuff. I mean, there's a reason why
Yes.
these people have advanced degrees
Yes.
in their field. And Michael Pence, are you kidding? I mean,
I'm going to
Go ahead. No, please, go ahead.
I'm going to jump to my schmuck of the week, which is
Okay.
Mike Pence, for naming Larry Kudlow to this task force. Unbelievable. Larry Kudlow is what's his title? Craig, you know all this.
What is his official title in the administration? I don't
he
know.
took over for whatever Gary
financial
Cohn was.
sycophant? Is
Yeah,
that what it is?
Whatever Gary Cohn was.
Yeah,
Gary,
that's right.
globalist Gary,
Commerce
yeah,
secretary
yeah,
or
he's
whatever?
Like,
No,
he's
he's
not
not
commerce
commerce
secretary,
but he's not that, but
he's
it's-
he's involved in
The Commerce Secretary is 100.
Right.
You know it was
yeah,
him if you saw him.
and it's like if this virus is half as bad as it could be, the only people I want on this task force should have MD or PhD after their names, and their degrees should be in something called science. And it should not be Larry Kudlow, whose job is obviously to massage the stock market. So
Yes.
that,
Well, he
so
did a
that-
fine job the other day because he went on TV on Monday and said this is a good time to buy the dip.
Yeah.
And you see where we are today. Trump gave his little conference on Wednesday, and yesterday was the single biggest drop in the history of the stock market. So
Right,
That
exactly.
tells you how much effect.
Yeah, buy the dip.
Those green eye shade guys aren't listening
Yeah.
to the
When there's blood on the floor, even if the blood is yours.
But here's the thing that gave me less confidence about Mike Pence than perhaps I had before, which is hard to
I
do.
was going to say it's
The New York
nothing for
Times
nothing.
reporting today that Trump actually said, well, give it to Pence because he's got nothing else to do.
wonderful.
Which, I mean, I know the vice president is somewhat of a ceremonial position. You don't have a whole lot of official responsibilities, but I'd like to think that Joe Biden actually,
Dick
took on some
Cheney
responsibilities.
was
Dick
the
Cheney was
president.
definitely involved, absolutely. But the fact that Mike Pence doesn't have anything else to do, so you put him in charge of it, that's the worst reason to give somebody a gig
Really?
that I can think of.
But the
Right,
funny thing is, he has plenty to do since he's been there. Every day he has to get up and kiss Trump's ass. And he has to do it 24/7. I mean, that's a very tough, rigorous
It
job.
is.
And he has worked his behind off to try to be the perfect ass kisser.
Right.
Even when they anointed him, I don't know if you saw anything at the press conference. His first statement was how wonderful it was to have a president like this.
Yeah, it was. That was
And, you
what
know, like,
was so alarming.
really?
It's like, let me introduce Mike Pence, who's going to be handling this,
Yeah.
and the first words out of his mouth are more butt kissing. So it's just
Heil Trump. It's. I mean, we saw that at that one thing where they had everyone sitting around, the cabinet members and stuff, and they all had to go around and say how grateful they were and how great it was. And the only one who didn't do that was Mattis.
Madison.
Yeah.
He was the only one who had some dignity. He said, "I'm walking out of here with some dignity. I'm sorry."
Well,
But-
speaking of appointees, Alex Azar, who of course is now Secretary of Health and Human Services, in talking to Congress about this outbreak the other day, one of the questions was asked by a Democratic lawmaker: is this vaccine, when it becomes available, going to
If
be
it
affordable?
becomes available.
If it becomes available. And most scientists, global scientists, are suggesting that we're a couple weeks away from a vaccine. But
I saw
No,
12 to
I
18
saw-
months.
I
by
saw
the
it
way.
more
Well,
like-
I saw Israel has
Israel says
developed.
they're close.
Yeah,
Well,
Israel says they might be able to do it in a few weeks.
well, but then it requires animal trials and it requires human
either
trials.
way, either way,
Israel, they're always
the question was, will this be affordable for people? And he says, well, we're not going to put a price cap on it because we need these companies to get involved. At the same time,
All right.
This threw me off the rails yesterday.
You know who Alex
My whole
Azar's-
commentary on yesterday's show was just basically saying this is exactly what's wrong with our healthcare system.
You know where he
No.
comes from, though.
Yeah, he's the former
comes from the
president
pharmaceutical-
of
Former drug
Eli
company
Lilly.
executive, exactly.
Yeah.
But he's basically saying,
Another
well, we
Hoosier,
can't guarantee
probably.
that it's going to be affordable, which is telling me that basically, if you're poor or you don't have good coverage, you're SOL. You're
Or-
just, you might not get the vaccine.
More likely, they're just going to soak somebody for it. They're going to soak the federal government, or they're going to soak.
I have
whatever.
an idea. Use the power of the government to conscript these companies into the service to develop something and put it out there the way that they did in World War II by converting the auto
Craig,
companies into machines of war
that's-
and doing this kind of stuff.
That's communism.
Well, it might be, but it's also when it comes to a
Socialism,
public
that's
health,
what I'm about.
a potential pandemic.
Things
It seems
that-
to me that putting the forces of good available in our healthcare system might be something that we want to
Things
explore.
have changed a bit in 70 years in terms of this society too. I mean, think about it.
You
Is
just
there
get
a-
to say you're patriotic instead of actually doing something about it.
Absolutely. You sing the national anthem, you applaud the poor guy who comes out with one leg because he got it shot off in Afghanistan, and that makes you a patriot.
Right.
You don't have to stand for a military draft. You certainly don't have to serve in the Army, and you don't have to think about anything else or anybody else. And that's what this country is nowadays.
You're absolutely
That
right.
is such an uplifting view of
But
our,
he's
of our
true.
but
democracy.
he's right.
It's the
You
truth.
know,
I'm not
Leave it-
disagreeing. I'm
Leave
not
it to the guy
disagreeing.
who knows. To say
Everybody is. What's in it for me? What's about me? You're not going to have that kind of sacrifice like you had back then.
that.
No.
You're just not going to have it. There's too many. This is a.
But I
country
do
filling
not
me
think
first.
it's asking too much to find a way to make this drug affordable for anybody that wants to get this.
But look who you're
immunized
asking. When you
vaccination.
put the foxes in charge of the hen houses, I mean, look who you're asking. You're asking a guy who made his fortune as the president of Eli Lilly, meaning that he was one of the other pharmaceutical companies that, as a condition of Obamacare, got them to agree that they won't let the government negotiate
Yeah.
Right.
over the prices of drugs. And God, do you think that would be effective if Medicare and Medicaid could come in and say, well, you want how much? 100? We give you 20.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It's kind of a big market that they have a hard time ignoring.
Well, the interesting thing about this, though, is it is impacting how people are going to look at this race going forward. President Trump is going to be judged on how he responds to this and whether or not the United States does see some sort of pandemic type levels in this country, which we could. We don't know what's going to happen, but the stock market has now basically erased all the gains of the last year in the last 3-4 days. I'm sure it'll come back in some capacity, but if he doesn't have that to point at and say, "Look, the economy's going great," could this be, his Katrina?
I would say this. I think the difference between him and George W. Bush is Bush, nobody had this committed group. Well, Bernie's the closest that has a committed group of people who I don't think it makes any difference what happens, what you say, or whatever. You can't make a bigger asshole out of yourself than he already has. Not just having to do with this, but in general.
Yeah.
I mean, it's if you got up in the morning and said, I'm going to do something today that's going to show everybody in the country that I'm an idiot, you couldn't do it more than he has, and it still doesn't affect his base. So I don't know if the
It's a
Katrina
Teflon
effect.
Don.
But competency is one of those things, like, at least supporters in their mind, you can say, well, he's doing a great job. He's doing the stuff he said he was going to do, whether he's like putting up a couple of walls here and there or the stock market's performing. His supporters could always point to, at least in their mind, and say he's doing what he said he was going to do. This could be one of those things that shows that he is not very competent.
I don't think there's any doubt that the market will have some effect. I mean, if it stays down, if it goes down, it's been down 3,000 points this week.
Right.
If it stayed down, there's going to be people. I saw an article in the Times today where a lady said that her parents were Trumpites because their 401k was doing fine. I mean, there are people that are like that. But I think it's a little bit too much to ask of those who are bombarded by Rush Limbaugh and Fox News all the time and the spin that they put on it to see a reaction like we had in Katrina.
All right, well, let's talk about the Democrats for just a second because you just mentioned Bernie. We did have a debate this week, which was quite interesting. I think what I came away from that debate was that CBS shouldn't host any more debates. It was a free-for-all, people yelling over each other.
These are absolutely worthless events.
It's like big-time wrestling.
I didn't learn anything.
It's like let it rip.
Of course it's
they're just trying to, create confusion and they
and moments that people will share,
right, and embarrassments and little sound bites that they can go and they're successful at that, but it's just a mess.
The Times had an editorial that said exactly basically what Nancy just said. Their editorial yesterday was just, let's put an end to debates. There's no need to have mass screaming, which is basically what all these things are,
sure.
And particularly where the moderators are incompetent, which they certainly were on Tuesday. I mean, if it's a one-on-one debate, when you have Douglas versus Lincoln or Bush versus Gore or whatever,
you can only dream.
No, but then at least you can watch and you can see how people react. But like you guys are saying, that just screaming at each other, it's
well,
a
if
total
the New
waste
York
of
Times
time.
is in full agreement, and as a media elitist, I have to say I have just retired the trophy. So there we go.
Well, so is anybody? I mean, I see a lot of hand-wringing over the possibility that Bernie might get a whole lot of delegates over the next few days and do really, really well in places that Biden was expected to do well. What do we think? It Bernie's?
I think Bernie has, and I think people are coming around to it, is that Bernie has tapped into a group, and a different group, but the same type of thing that Trump tapped into. Trump tapped into, I think, people who felt a little disenfranchised, people who had a piece of the pie, who have a less of the pie because of their jobs, they're getting paid less for whatever. I think Bernie is tapping into, like in Nevada, he's tapped into the culinary union. He's tapping to people who have never had a piece of the pie, and he's got the Bernie Bros, and he's got the young people there, and so he's tapping into it. He's getting a lot of support, and even in the national in the national polls, he's still outpolling Trump. So I think. I think people have to come around, and I'm not endorsing any candidate. I'm still
trying to figure it out.
Trying to figure it out myself, but I think Bernie is tapped into something that Trump tapped into the last time.
My daughter is 23. She's an artist, so she's never had her piece of the pie, and she probably wouldn't if she remained an artist. But she made a point of going online to find the absentee ballot. She filled out the request. She printed it out. She found a stamp in my office and mailed the thing. It arrived a few days later.
That's a sign of progress.
She brought
right there.
it into wherever I was, and she filled it out in front of me, and it's like, and then sent it back out. I mean, that's a committed voter, and there are an awful lot of young people.
My son
did
the same thing.
way.
Did the same thing. He's away at school, and he didn't want to get caught up by any of those, things to not.
Is your son a Bernie bro?
Right.
He is not that I'm aware of, but he definitely leans in that direction. But no, he thinks that the Bernie Bros are a little obnoxious for his taste. But my son is much more. He's a sort of.
Well, Bernie, we were saying earlier, Bernie speaks in declarative sentences about everything. You can imagine going to a deli. I want a corned beef. Now make sure it's lean. No, I don't want it lean, and I want the French fries like this. I mean,
the fries were not crispy.
Crisp, and another thing, the coleslaw's got to be crisp and fresh.
Lengel and I have had a lot of experience being around people who are just like Bernie.
Yes.
Whether that sounds ethnic to you guys, it's intended to sound ethnic.
Right. It's like Jackie Mason.
Kind of.
Did you ever hear a Jew goes to a restaurant, the table's too close to the kitchen, the peas are too big, the carrots are too small.
Tell the
The
joke.
waitress comes up and says to the 4 Jewish women in Florida, "Can I ask you, is anything okay?"
That's the joke I was just going to tell you.
but back to Bernie. Bernie, I think I agree that it's silly to write off someone just because you think he's an asshole, which he can act like an asshole. He also has the tendency, for instance, how he handled this AIPAC thing this week. I thought it was such foolishness. I mean, there's plenty of us, me included, that don't have much use for AIPAC. But you don't have to walk across the street and spit in the guy's face, which
Yeah.
is basically what he did, and start using the kind of language that he used. The question, though, to me is, with the Democratic field being so fragmented, he really hasn't received more than, 24, 26,
Yeah.
28% of the vote. And you just wonder, when it gets down to one-on-one, if assuming it does, can we really picture two guys in their 70s, one who just had a heart attack, one who's never exercised a day in his fucking life, I mean, running against each other? Don't the young people, you would think
But-
that young people would be screaming for the opportunity to vote for somebody that's at least in the vicinity of their age, who's going to suffer the consequences of climate change, which none of these people talk about.
We
Well-
haven't heard anything about that.
But
Right.
I think the young people see Bernie as cool grandpa, as opposed to, he's like the one. He's kind of like that. Well, they're at every show in Detroit. The older people who come and everybody's like, yeah, it's cool grandpa. Anyway, he's cool grandpa, whereas Trump just reminds them of the worst boss they ever had.
Right,
you know?
but I think what'll be interesting to me is because of the way Trump has been kind of Teflon about all of his sins. I wonder,
Well-
when they vet Bernie, when Bernie gets thoroughly vetted, including his wife and the school and all that
Right.
stuff. Maybe that's the populace these days. Well, so what? Who cares? My wife
Well,
said
you
to me
know-
about Bloomberg last night. Well, he said a lot of those things about women. This is a pretty feminist woman.
Yeah.
Well, he said these things about women, but that was years ago. And I said, oh, okay, if that's
Okay.
the way you
Well-
look at it, that you're female.
You know
so-
what I think is interesting is that from an ageist or viewpoint is that I think it's redefining what 70s are about. I mean, I don't have
a
the energy.
person's
Well,
70s?
I'm just saying that.
Oh.
I mean, the thought of having that level of energy.
Well-
a guy Bernie Sanders, people, out there 3 times a day and getting on planes and flying and then being president. I mean, the stamina it takes to be president. It's like, who the heck?
Didn't Steve just say, oh, you weren't here that week.
that's
Steve
true.
made a little speech, and this is a man who's, I won't say your age, who is in superior shape.
Well,
but
he gave
said,
it away 2 weeks ago when he said it was 50th anniversary of his
That's
senior
right.
year at
Okay,
Michigan.
so you're 70 years old, right? And you're in very good shape. You're at the gym all the time, and you said you would never run for president, or you never want to be president because it's an exhausting job. I mean,
That's
look what it
insanity.
did. Look
Who
what it
would-
did to Barack Obama over the course of
Yeah.
8 years. It turned his hair white.
And he was, how old was he? Like 46?
He was in his 40s when he took
Yeah,
that
46.
21.
The idea is, it is a little bit perplexing that, a lot of the front runners here are that, in their late
And they all
70s.
hate, and all the young people hate Pete. I mean, they hate.
Yeah,
Pete
well,
Buttigieg.
he's
At
got-
least
and
a
why
fair
do you think
number.
that is?
He's got some problems across a bunch of different lines.
Yeah, I
but
know.
Why do you
all
think they hate Pete Buttigieg?
Because they see him as like the
They see him as manufactured, like
Yeah.
out of central casting kind of thing. Like,
and a suck up to the ruling class. I mean, they're all about like overthrowing.
Well, I
you
don't
know.
blame them for saying they'll take billionaires' money if it's going to help them win an election, because the Republicans will never say that they'll turn it down.
No, of
and you do
course.
need money to win elections.
Right.
All right, let's go ahead.
I'm going to say
Best
it's a
point.
little bothersome that Bernie is turning on Bloomberg and saying, "I won't take any of your money" and
That's
stuff
insane.
like that.
That
it's
is
like
insane.
it's
It's
like
insane.
in the
Change
end,
your
whoever.
minds.
If they want to have any kind of unity. Why not take? Look, for
Nobody-
whatever shortcomings Bloomberg has, he does have some progressive thoughts about, climate change, about
Gun control.
gun control, and stuff like that. And to be outright dismissive of him and say, I don't want you to help me out is
Nobody in
ridiculous.
Washington is completely clean. Anybody who's won elected office at a statewide level has had to take some contributions or make some deals or talk to somebody that would be less than tasteful if people knew about it. Anyway,
Exactly.
all right, let's talk about lawmakers here for just a second, because I want to get back to Detroit. Sherry Gay Dagnogo, of course, is a state rep from Detroit, took a letter to the White House yesterday arguing for some sort of clemency for Kwame Kilpatrick. Kwame Kilpatrick, of course, sentenced to 28 years in prison, and we could argue whether or not that sentence was excessive.
I think
and I will ask the defense attorney
clearly
about
excessive.
that. But I
Would
mean,
you,
it
would you
just.
agree with that or not?
But I'm sorry, this thing is politically fraught. I don't know if you're.
I think I know why.
He probably can't say a
No,
whole
no,
lot.
I'm not
but-
going to hesitate. I'm waiting until he finishes.
No, no.
Unlike the rest of the Jews, I'm going to let the guy finish his answer.
Wow. Okay. Well, then go ahead. What do you think? I mean, does she
think-
make a point?
I think a number of things. Number one, I read her. We were talking about this in the gym, and I read her letter. I think they printed it 3 times to make sure I was reading it accurately. And the thing that struck me the most was that nowhere in that letter did she in any way, shape, or form suggest he wasn't guilty as hell.
Yes.
She didn't in that letter suggest in any way, shape, or form that he hadn't screwed over his constituents in the city of Detroit, many of whom supported him not once but twice. What she talked about was the length of the sentence. And reasonable minds can differ on the length of the sentence. What people need to realize is because of the amount of money that was taken and all the different enhancements that come into a federal sentence, the guy's guidelines could have been life. I mean, literally, they were like 360 to life.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean 28 is the right sentence. Personally, I think it's too high. But here's a guy, just like Blagojevich, when you're talking about pardoning someone, pardons are meant for people who, A, might have been sentenced to more than they should, but B, somebody who shows some remorse or the least acknowledgement of the fact they did something wrong. Blagojevich, and Kwame will do the exact same thing, he got off the plane and the first person that stuck a microphone in front of his face, he says, well, I didn't do anything. I was sentenced.
I'm a political prisoner.
Political prisoner. That wasn't me on the phone saying, you think I'm giving this fucking seat away for nothing? That wasn't me. That was some other guy. It was Laurel and Hardy or something.
I agree with that. There is no remorse about
Criminal mind.
I mean, Kwame has not expressed any. He's not apologizing. He hasn't done anything wrong. Which clearly, we've had people in the trial who testified that they brought bribe money for him, like $10,000. There were contracts where actually other contractors testified that Kwame made sure, even though it was a bidding process, that his friend Bobby Ferguson was part of the these projects and stuff like that. It was clear, and there was about $800,000 in his bank account that was unaccounted for.
Well, we can make it a lot simpler than that. He was tried by a jury in a lengthy trial. The jury had, if I recall, 6 black people and a Latino. And they convicted him
on
whatever it was. They convicted him on everything. And I remember reading one of the jurors, it was a black female, said that the thing that irritated her the most was, I live in the city. I was a victim, and I supported him in both elections. I mean, I don't think we have to get into the nuts and bolts. He's convicted by a jury. Whether the sentence is too long, that's another issue. But to me, the pardon process is intended for people who really got screwed. Innocent people, for instance, or someone who really recognizes what they've done. I've seen guys who've gone off and they wind up helping the kids and doing all kinds of stuff inside. That's the kind of people who are supposed to get pardoned. They got 25 years for weed or something like that.
Yeah.
We had I know somebody who got pardoned by George W. Bush. It was Sergeant Jimmy Harris from the Detroit Police Department. He was caught up in an FBI sting, and he was guilty. I mean, they caught him, red-handed, and he got 30 years. And so he had a good lawyer who had some connects, and basically he served 15 years. And the argument was, hey, why should he spend 30 years for an FBI sting, a crime that was made up by the FBI? And they let him out. But he was contrite, and he got it. But Kwame has. Continues with his arrogance, and he has to, at least at some point. I mean, I think he should get a pardon at some point, whether it's 15 years or whatever. He should not serve 28 years, but he also needs to say, yes, I was wrong. But I feel like he grew up in a culture with his father and some other people close to him, who were taught that this is the way you do business. This is the way government is run.
Take care of your
you
friends.
Want a deal? The word was that always, you had to pay his father, who was a consultant, $10,000 to get a sit down with his son. And so he says, I didn't steal anything. He didn't steal anything except, the contracts probably ended up costing the city more. And, and the interesting thing is now Trump is pushing for the black vote. And so, I mean, this could play where he may perceive this as a good thing for him to grant something, or at least say, look, at some point I will grant this. But I'm not sure in the black community there's a lot of people who thought Kwame was bad, that he was evil, that he
quite
had,
a few.
And so and like Steve points out, that the jury was half
right.
I'm not sure that Trump is going to touch this before the election, because Macomb County could be a problem if you do this.
There's a lot more white people.
There's more
out there
negatives
in Podonkville that are going to think of it as, oh, look what he did for this guy, and are going to be black folk who are going to turn around and vote for somebody like Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
all right, we got a few minutes left. I want a couple more things that I want to get to before we do Schmuck of the Week here. University of Michigan Dr. Robert Anderson, who is no longer with us, deceased several years ago.
Dr. Drop Your Drawers.
Dr. Drop Your Drawers. Just another university handling a crisis like this in a way that is less than ideal. What is going on with this? I mean, sexual assault and abuse by these physicians, obviously something that's reported. You're supposed to take it seriously, and obviously the 70s were a different time than now. But
who said it started in the 70s?
Well, it's going back to
really. I got there in the fall of '66. Doc Anderson was our team doctor.
Yeah.
Really? Did you know him?
Did we know him? Of course we knew him.
Yeah.
How well did he know you?
Not very well, but I was from Detroit, and I have two uncles who are doctors. Okay, and
they know who to pick on.
So I mean, but universities trying to do their best. I mean, Mark Schlissel, of course, saying, "Hey, the apology came out right away," but they are going to have to unpack all this and see just how long they've been ignoring.
I have a suggestion that these state universities, I mean, it's all about the institution. I mean, we saw it at Penn State. We see it in the Catholic Church. We see where the institutions are far more important than the people they're serving.
There's no comparison between Larry Nassar and the Catholic Church.
No,
Doc
no,
Anderson.
it's not systemic.
And I can tell
it's
you
not
that
as systemic,
for sure.
But I can tell you that the cover-up, the idea of protecting the image of the institution, worrying about donations, there's a common theme there. It's not this. It's not a direct comparison.
I'm telling you, okay, when you say the cover-up, what went on with Doc Anderson had nothing to do with anybody covering up anything. The coaches didn't know. The athletic director didn't know. The president of the university. Sorry?
Did you know? Did people talk about it on your team?
Did I know?
No.
I'll repeat. I was playing at Michigan when he was the team doctor.
Okay. So were the players talking about this?
Everybody knew how he was. That's that matter of what he did. Everybody knew how he was. Right. Everyone knew.
Okay.
When we got there, the guys a year ahead of us told us. When the next guys came, we told them.
Huh.
But we didn't. The coaches didn't know.
Nobody
thought anything up. We just thought he was funny. That's the word we used in Detroit.
We had a guy. We had a guy at
funny.
the Detroit News. He did aggregate. He did like the little aggregates for the sports department. He was probably in his 40s at the time, and he had a column called ML Curley, which was a wrestling column. That was his, and he was a pedophile, and people joked about it, made little jokes in the newsroom about it and stuff like that. He ended up eventually going to prison for getting convicted. He left the news and he was convicted. So, I mean, it happens in institutions, but what I was going to say is a good recommendation, I think, would be for any state university to have somebody, and maybe they do have that, but to have an independent monitor that reports directly to the state and monitors these types of things. And
when?
Well,
50 years later?
No, now. Well, they have it now because
Well,
there's still cover-ups for
Make sure
athletes.
it's not going to happen
There's
again.
still Michigan State had
do your best to ensure it.
Michigan State had a serious problem with athletes who were sexually assaulting.
The Title IX business, with sexual assault, and it's generally applies to between students, but it can also be students and faculty.
Right.
But I think I hear what you're saying, but I also think he is right in that when a powerful institution is threatened, it always protects itself first.
Circle the wagons.
Yeah, circle the wagons. And that happened with the Catholic Church, it's happened with MSU, and now it appears to be happening
Penn State.
Penn State
I know
for
we're
sure.
getting to the end of the thing, but let me ask you guys, what exactly do you want them to do? The guy's dead for 12 years.
I don't know.
The statute of limitations is long since run. You got these lawyers coming from Colorado who specialize in these kinds of lawsuits. Who are they going to sue?
I think
Here's something interesting. I wish I could show you.
Later?
I wish I could show the camera here, but I just pulled up a story from the Detroit News about yesterday's press conference and the guys who came forward.
Yeah.
There are two ads on the page from
Actually, there are three. There's one
Greenwald
at the top.
Law.
From the law.
Says,
Right.
if you were assaulted by the University of Michigan, Dr. Robert Anderson, you may have a claim.
I'm telling you, that's
Yeah.
what this is all about.
And
Why
it
else?
just-
Why would lawyers? We were talking about this in the gym this morning. Why would lawyers come from Colorado and hold a press conference here in Southfield, I think it was, and they know there's no case? I mean, I've talked to some judges, because I'm not a civil lawyer. Who are you going to sue? 50 years? That guy was there just after we left. The wrestler and then the Olympic guy. That's 1998, I think. Right before Anderson was done there. But the point is that I can tell you, at least when we were there, there wasn't anybody talking about anything, not to coaches or anybody in power. It was just one of those things, and you just, you did what you did, and you ignored the guy. You wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do, and that was the end of it.
All right, we got a couple of minutes left here. I do want to have one positive story today.
Okay.
This is somebody,
Before we
Erica
get to schmuck,
Geis, who is a senator, a Michigan senator from Taylor, a Democrat from Taylor, introduced a bill which likely won't pass, but I love this bill, that would require art and music to be a part of every district's curriculum in the state.
That a wonderful thing. That's
what a wonderful thing. And of course, it's
That's
probably
how it was in our day.
well,
Yeah,
it used to be.
certainly was.
And look at how many great people came out of Detroit public schools, especially because that amazing music program they used to have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Motown wouldn't
Earl
exist.
Klugh,
It's the first thing to get
Mumford High
cut.
School.
It's always the first thing to get cut in schools when they're having budgetary problems is cultural stuff. Sports don't seem to get cut. And I mean, I'm a big fan of sports, but not the same way. You have to pay a lot more to play than you used to.
Right.
But art and this is something that I think I'd love to see this happen. So I just wanted to make sure that she got a little shout out from me for doing the right thing, because art and music education is important. As the father of a musician, he couldn't play sports growing up. He had some physical problems growing up, but music was his thing.
Absolutely.
And the fact that it was available to him has made a huge difference in his life, and every kid should have that opportunity to figure that out.
Seconded.
All right.
Amen.
My kid.
Now,
All right.
schmuck of the week.
I already had
You
mine.
gave yours.
Yeah.
Recap for the audience. Who was your schmuck of the week?
Mike Pence for
Pence.
putting Larry Kudlow on the coronavirus.
Okay, that's a
task
good one. We're
force.
going to vote on these at the end.
Okay.
I was going to say the woman who ran that sham adoption agency.
Yes.
And ripped off people to the tune of collectively more than $2 million, and then spent it on
Garbage.
Yeah. Louis Vuitton, whatever.
Right. Crap.
But I think collectively, I think the fans at the Garth Brooks thing
I'm going with the
for
same
booing for booing Garth Brooks because he was wearing a Barry Sanders jersey, and they thought it was
because it said
Bernie.
Sanders.
So he's
Bernie
playing.
Sanders.
Okay, so Garth
heard
Brooks
this yet?
plays at Ford Field the other
The
day.
fans thought that Barry Sanders was the same person as Bernie
Because
Sanders.
it's just
So
a
Garth
Sanders.
Brooks,
Number 20.
Garth Brooks,
Yeah.
who was an athlete at Oklahoma State, at the same time that Barry Sanders was, they knew each other. He was a track and field athlete at
had the
Oklahoma State. He goes to Ford Field to play a concert, the home of the Detroit Lions, and he wears a Barry Sanders 20 jersey because that's his number. Of course, we all know this here in Detroit.
Thinking he
and
is
all
being
these
cool.
people just rip him on social media saying, "Leave the politics out of it, man." Thinking it's Bernie Sanders 2020.
This was in Detroit
This
where
was
he had the cancer?
just last weekend. He sold
In
out
the
Ford
concert,
Field like
yeah.
3 days in a row or something like
But there was
that.
a photograph of him that ran on like his social
It's
media.
a Sanders 20. It's
Oh, and so
clearly
the
a
people
Lions.
from not from Detroit.
It's a
are-
Lions jersey. Clearly, he's wearing, which is not the
Yeah.
first time he's worn an athletic jersey
Okay,
at a
Ford
concert.
Field.
But
Yeah.
thousands of people go online and say, "I'm never listening to your records again."
You
because
lost a fan, man.
You lost a fan. Leave your politics. You do what you're paid to do, man. Just play.
Shut
I'm
up
never
and
listening
play.
to music again. I'm
Shut
like,
up and sing. Yeah.
ignorance is rampant.
It is.
Now,
Yeah, I got to vote for. I didn't know about that one, but that's tough to beat.
see, and the great thing is,
You retired the trophy from the weekly schmuck of the week. He would win every week.
well, there you go. Well, that's why it's named after
Yeah,
him.
the Donald Trump schmuck of the week goes
So
to the fans.
would you go the Garth Brooks fans who are ripping on him for thinking? And Garth Brooks is probably worth, I don't know, somewhere around $500 million, given the amount of records he sold over the
Yeah,
course. I
roughly.
guarantee you, he's probably not the guy looking to elect the dude that's going to take 50% of his income.
I'll tell you what it shows, though. It really does show. We talk about this all the time, and it's the same in athletics as anything else. A lot of these young people, they have no institutional memory. Barry Sanders, they don't know. They don't know. They only know who Michael Jordan is because of the shoes. I guarantee you.
Oh, that's
if Jordan
probably
didn't
true.
have the shoes, they wouldn't know who he is.
We need to teach sports history.
No,
in
they
school.
have some sense of history in
No,
general.
I agree. No,
In
you're
general,
absolutely right.
Not just sports.
Yeah, Barry
Totally right.
Sanders is such a mensch and such a legend.
But not to these young
NFL.
people.
I
I'm
mean,
telling you,
geez.
they don't know.
If they could ever watch him, watch
Yep.
the highlight reels, kids.
Yeah,
Barry
you ain't never
Sanders.
seen
It was
nothing
pretty
like
good.
it. That's for
Barry
sure.
Sanders. And I
Anyway,
assure you, the other Sanders can't run as fast.
I can run faster than anyone.
Don't
My
even
heart is
question.
fine.
I wrote the damn bill.
Although some guy
did.
did run a 4.240 yesterday at the NFL Combine, which is pretty impressive. Hey, real quick, the Big Ten, what a mess. What a mess, as
Toss 'em
always.
up in the air.
I mean, Michigan lost to Wisconsin yesterday game. I thought they were probably going to win, but then Michigan State's struggling too, but who knows? I mean, this is just a brutal,
What do you think of
brutal
the coach?
stretch.
Of our coach?
Yeah, you've
Of Juwan?
Yeah,
I love
Juwan.
him. You guys ask me this every time. I think he's phased the perfect
Beeline
person for
stepping
the
down
job.
at the Cavs.
Well, it probably got to a point where he realized it wasn't going anywhere. He's 67 or 68 years old, and he didn't want to put up with the daily stuff. I wish he would have talked to a few people before he took the job.
He wouldn't.
That's,
You know,
that's the NBA.
It's the Bo Schembechler thing where they come in and they think they can treat people, professional athletes, like college kids, and it didn't come
Wait,
off
it's not
well.
Schembechler. Schembechler never did that.
Well, when he went to the Tigers, he
Well,
I think.
he wasn't coaching them. though.
Yeah, but he was
There's only
a
been
joke.
there's only been one successful college coach, Brad Stevens at the Celtics. He's the only successful college coach that was a success in the NBA, and the list is long. Lon Kruger,
Right, Dick Vitale.
Well, he wasn't a successful coach.
No, he
either,
wasn't.
which-
Larry
successful.
Brown.
Well, Larry Brown was a pro, though. He played in the pros.
That's
he,
true.
He was a professional, and,
Yeah.
and
Right.
he,
Larry
He was
Brown
successful in both ranks.
yeah, he
though.
was a different kind of a guy. But in general, because of the control, that's exactly right what Lengel said.
All right. Well, we got to wrap up for the day. Real quick, I want to thank our sponsors, Techtown Detroit and Samaritas, for supporting this program. I appreciate it every week. Thank you very, very much for that. Thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering our broadcast today. Thanks to my guests, Alan Lengel,
Thank
Nancy
you.
Derringer, and, of course, Steve Fishman for being here as well. Thanks to all of you for checking it out. Again, if you like this, share it with your friends. Let them know we're doing this. Subscribe, all that good stuff. It'll be available as a podcast a little bit later, and look for it on our YouTube page over the weekend and at DeadlineDetroit.com. Don't forget, while you're at Deadline, click on that little membership thing we've got going on there. It's a big deal because none of us are getting wealthy here, but we are
True
doing
that.
what we love to do and getting an opportunity
$3
to
a
practice
month.
something
That's right.
that matters, and that is responsible
course, we have to
journalism.
do, too, yeah.
That's what we do, and support that. We appreciate it very, very much, especially in this day and age. It's more important than ever
Right.
that you have people doing this kind of work. So we appreciate everybody that stepped up so far, and we hope that you will choose to do so as well. And as always, Alan, take us out.
Drive home safely.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey, the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency, but they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families, and they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state.